Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. We have the legendary Dom C in the channel tonight, and tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk ad nauseum about the draft and the prospects for months, but we're going to do something different. We're going to talk about the process. Again, super chat to jump to the front of the line, get your comments and questions in. Dom, I'll just give you the floor briefly. Your thoughts on the 2025 Jets season?
Oh, there's not much. This will be a quick synopsis. Not sure if in my 40 plus years on this earth if I've watched or felt a worse season and felt like more despair than I have in 2025. Yeah, the offense didn't work because the quarterback didn't work. We knew we were going to be light in weapons coming into the season. The defense was an absolute abomination. It was as bad as it gets. As bad as it gets.
Yeah, to quote the great Larry David, it was pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, but again, Aaron Glenn is going to be here as the head coach. Darren Mucci is going to be the general manager. So, the big thing for this regime is they have to learn from the mistakes of last year. Now, again, granted, last year's draft was challenging because they just came in, and you actually came on my show and I asked this question. What happens with the scouts? And you were the one to tell me, well, they keep the same scouts until the draft. And then you saw a massive turnover at the end of the draft process. So now you've had a full season with Muji scouts. You're going to have the full offseason process. You're not going to have to worry about building your staff. Well, outside of Aaron Glenn finding a DC, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah.
What do you think the Jets, the biggest lesson from the process last year going into this year? Like, what is the biggest thing they have to change when evaluating this college class?
Well, I think, excuse me. Excuse me. As I started to talk, something went down
the Jets are taking the life out of Dom. They're taking the life out of all of us.
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you this much. You talked about the process. I think that's going to be, different. And I think it has to be different. You went in, we talked about last year, the scouts and all that, for the most part, they all worked or they were all contracted through May. So all the intel and everything that they did for the 2025 draft, which was last April, was built off of, the reports and the legwork and the process of scouts that, don't know what Muji wants or how he wants to do it and how the college personnel director wants to do it or what they plan to do with it, so on and so forth. So, I'm not going to say they went in blind, but they, when a GM comes in, their first draft is usually a little bit rough around the edges for that reason alone. Right. So, I think the Jets brought in a lot more. They made a lot of sweeping changes in the front office and the scouting department and the scouts, from top to bottom, the player personnel department. I think they brought in more analytics. This year they brought in an analytics team, so they're looking at stuff, from through a different lens completely. I hope, it seemed last year, and again, my opinion only. There's no facts behind this, but it seemed that Muji and Glenn kind of honed in on a couple people, and they didn't. They had a lot going on last year. I don't know if they had a full gamut of efforts or responsibilities in terms of what they're going to do and how they're going to conduct the process for scouting. I think that they honed in on a couple people and just went and got their people. Now, I don't know if that's, kind of going to be Muji's MO. Like, they brought in Arian Smith for a 30 visit. They liked Arian Smith. They liked what he did, and they went and got him, and they paid, they paid a price because they, in the sense that they went and got him early. Right. They had their eyes on guys like, Jakrowski or Bill or my God, Ja'Cory Merritt. He ended up, going or getting drafted by Washington, but I know he was a guy that they really liked. There's another quarterback out of North Dakota State that they had honed in on. They brought in for a 30 visit.
Yeah, Cam
really
Miller, I think.
Cam
right?
Miller, yeah. Now he's with the Dolphins. They went and like I said, they fell in love with the Miami kids.
Yeah.
They fell in love with the Miami kids, and I don't know if that's because that was intel that they had from their guys. You know what I mean? Like the limited intel that Muji and his real people had. That they could only get it out or could only really expend bits and pieces. So they went and they drafted Mayanoa, who it's fine. I don't for a 5th round, 6th round linebacker, he's a depth piece. He's a special teams guy. That's fine. But they traded up to get Malachi Moore. They traded up to get Tyler Barron. They didn't trade up, but they drafted early Arian Smith. All these guys with the exception of Malachi Moore, who saw a heavy dose of snaps on the defensive side of the ball. Once Andre Sisco got hurt, all these guys, they went up and plucked and got were all special teamers. They tried to play Tyler Barron. He was just unplayable, and he was inactive for the second half of the season.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's going to be the story of this draft because I know the headliner. We know the Jets have 4 picks in the top 44, but they don't have a 3rd round pick because of the Hassan Reddick trade. They're going to have multiple picks. I believe last time I checked, it's a 4, 2 5s, 3 6s, and a 7. Again, with the comp formula working out. So when I look at this offseason, I'm not sure how great they're going to do in free agency. I don't know how great Aaron Glenn's going to do in recruiting. So to me, the draft is really where you're going to have to make a differential. And last day's day 3 left a lot to be desired. I kind of wonder, the approach last year seemed like they were taking risks on players who had some upside. Like Arian Smith, I think is the perfect example. I think they looked at that speed and said, we can coach you up. And I think Aaron Glenn, the staff, was humbled this first season because they talked about, we're going to coach up this guy. We're going to coach up all these guys. And that didn't work. I'm curious if maybe they go for guys that maybe not have the high ceiling, but were just more productive players at the collegiate level just because they know that floor is a better place than trying to take a swing on a high ceiling on day 3.
Yeah, they got to hit something like, because they have 31 expiring contracts. There's not many guys under contract, right?
Yeah.
So there's not many guys under contract. They need to influence or they need to double up and probably hit certain positional groups, not only through the draft, but also, through free agency. I think they need to supplement some of that stuff. You can't tell me that, you're going into your 2026 and your edge room is Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, both of which, Will McDonald has 2 more years left, especially if you exercise his, the 5th-year option. And Jermaine Johnson has 1. There's no depth behind those guys. Michael Clemens is a free agent. Michael Clemens is bad. He's a free agent. Braden McGregor's under contract, but there's obviously it's an undrafted free agent contract. There's no guaranteed money. You can move on from him. So can you move on from Eric Watts? You need an overhaul of that room. And, you're going to have to do it through draft capital and supplement it with free agency, because you're not gonna draft 4 defensive ends, and you're not it's not wise business to bring in 4 free agent defensive ends. So you're gonna have to split it up and do a little bit of both on each side, and that's just one positional group. I think you can make the same argument for linebacker and safety, and running back. Maybe you have no idea what's going on with Breece Hall.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions, and I do think you're right. Like, day 3 has to be better. And when we talk about day 3, everyone talks about finding your Puka Nacua, and that would be great. But you just want guys like, if Tyler Barron this year, for example, had 3.5, 4 sacks, we looked at him and said, you know what? He's not an every down player, but at least he's good in pass rushing situations. Like Arian Smith, okay, he was a great return. He became a great returner for us, or he becomes a guy that can stretch the field once or twice a game, but that didn't really happen. So the one thing I'm kind of curious too is Muji loves the capital. Last year, he got all these comp picks through free agency. I'm curious, one strategy I don't think is getting talked enough about is, does he go the route he went during the in-season? The trade for Brownlee, the trade for Jawan Briggs. Maybe he's more confident in looking at first or second year players where they have film in the National Football League instead of taking a risk on a 21, 22, 23-year-old out of college. So I'm curious if maybe when we get to the end of the draft, 2 of those picks were sent somewhere else to bring in maybe a veteran safety, or, well, not veteran, but you know what I'm saying, like a 1 year, second year safety, or a linebacker that fits more into this regime. Like, that's another strategy that I do think the Jets could implement this offseason.
Yeah, well, you have 6 or 7, give or take, depending on comp formula. You'll have 6 or 7 day 3 picks.
Yeah.
Right. You tie that in with the 4 early picks on days 1 and 2. They're not taking all 11 picks. So you can expect that some of them will be traded, and some of them will probably be used to trade up. And, whether it's early or later, you move up and say, all right, I'm going to move up from round 4 to round 3. And, here's a 6th rounder and a 7th rounder to boot to kind of make it even. Or like you said, you go and try to, comb the, the trade market where I think Darren Mucci did a really good job. His pro personnel department, kind of honed in and found an underutilized Jawan Briggs and figured that they could do something with him. I thought Harrison Phillips was a great find and a great addition as well. And Jarvis Brownlee is still TBD. I do love the way he fits the run and plays that physical style. I think, and listen, they were quick to move off of Michael Carter. And, Michael Carter, and call it what it is, Glenn and Muji might have been right, because Michael Carter didn't play a lot for Philadelphia once he got traded there.
Right.
He was just a depth piece for them. So, I like what Brownlee brings in terms of fitting the run. I still think that you're going to need more corner depth for sure. Both one guy that can play primarily outside, and one guy that can play, can kind of flip between either nickel and safety, or nickel corner or slot corner and outside corner. You're going to need probably 2 guys for that room, depending on what you think Quantez Stiggers is. I think Quantez Stiggers is going to be a Jet. I think his role has been solidified as special team gunner extraordinaire,
Yeah, and if you need him, like you saw in pinches, he can come in and fill in at the corner, even safety position. I think he's got a nice role. And again, like when we talk about day 3 picks, I think Stiggers is a perfect example. He has a role on this team. When I look at Arian Smith and I look at Kiko and I look at Tyler Barron, do they have a role on next year's Jets team? And at this moment, you can't definitively say that, outside of maybe Malachi Moore, who, again, I think showed some promise, and maybe not being a starter, but you at least know he's a nice rotational piece back in that safety.
Yeah, so I think I want to talk about Malachi Moore for a second. I was a big fan of the draft pick. A little disappointed in the film. I didn't think it was. I didn't really think it was anything to write home about. Yeah, there's nothing. Like a lot of what you saw in Malachi Moore, we had seen the year before in Tony Adams. So I think Malachi Moore is a fine replacement for Tony Adams. What this regime has to do is realize that role is really your third safety. It's really a core, a core special teams guy, or a sub package. When you play big nickel and have like 2-3 safeties on the field or something like that. I don't know if your plan is to have him as a starting safety, you have to bring in competition.
Oh yeah,
and I think the competition will probably usurp him in the starting role.
And I do think one of the things on this defense, where if I had to bet money on this draft, I think they're going to be looking for more bigger physical players. Like, I think when you look at the safety position, they're going to be looking for a bigger safety that can come and play in the box or come downhill. I think when you look at the linebacker, they want somebody of a CJ Mosley, like a 6'2", 6'3", but 240, 250 pounds in the middle of that field. And even at the edge position, I think when you look at some of these defensive end prospects, I think they're going to be looking for some bigger edges just to set the edge. And it just seems like this team wants to be a bigger, more physical team. I think Brownlee's a perfect example. You have Michael Carter, who's more of a cover corner, But then you bring in Brownlee, who can come in and lay the lumber. He can be more of that. Was basically a hybrid linebacker, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this defense played well for 5 games when he was in there. He gets put on the IR, then all of a sudden we know what happened the last 5 games of the season.
Yep.
So it is interesting, and this is a good one from Keep It Simple. He asks us, do you think AG will switch the base defense to a 3-4? The hard part is I don't know, because I don't know if Aaron Glenn's going to implement his own defense or if he's going to let whoever he hires as the DC implement theirs. And that's the hard part, because he kept saying, oh, it's Wilkes' defense. It's Wilkes' defense. It's not my defense. Where you're like, well, you're a defensive coach. Could you maybe throw him a freaking bone and help him out there?
Yeah. So to keep it simple's statement here. So if Glenn, I'll say this. We don't know who the DC is yet. I think I've only heard one name kind of circling.
They've only interviewed the Vikings defensive pass game coordinator. That's the only interview that's come through so far.
Yeah. So it depends on who the DC is and how much oversight Aaron Glenn's, or how much, he's going to stick his nose into this.
Yeah.
He might be feeling the heat. So he might, if you bring in a younger kid, who's first time coordinator or something like that, like this guy that they interviewed from Minnesota, it might be that Aaron Glenn has more input or say on the defense. And if that's the case, Aaron defenses were always very multiple.
Yeah.
He ran odd fronts, he ran even fronts. He ran a lot of, a lot of nickel, like sub package stuff with, 6 DBs on the field or 3-3-5 is another, big formation that Aaron Glenn used a lot, both in New Orleans and Detroit, where he had 3 down linemen, he had 3 linebackers, and then 5 defensive backs. So,
and you have like a guy like Brownlee, who's almost like that hybrid linebacker off there. So it's still it's almost a 3-4, but just with an extra DB out there.
Correct.
And I think that was the frustrating part I had last year, was watching Wilkes' vanilla defense, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, I don't know how Aaron Glenn can watch this and A, not vomit in his mouth, and B, not jump in there and make a change. But getting back a little bit onto the draft. So we know the Jets have these great picks in the top 44, but we talk about the strategy. The strategy to me is going to be really interesting now, because me and you discussed this off air, and I think most of us has gotten this impression. Again, we're recording this before Dante Moore makes his announcement, but I think if you had to be a betting man, Dante Moore is probably going back to Oregon. So now the strategy for how the Jets attack this draft is, where do they attack the quarterback and when do they look to make that reach? Because they have to at some point. They cannot go into next season, even if they traded for like a Mac Jones or something like that. They're going to have to bring in some kid. Like, do you think like a second round target is with 33 or 44 is in range, or how are you feeling about how they should attack this quarterback class, which again, the NIL has made very, very interesting?
Yeah. Well, to kind of piggyback to what you're saying, if I had to put money on, is he staying or is he going?
Yeah, Moore.
I would bet that Moore stays, and that has nothing to do about Friday's game. I think that this was coming the whole way. Every single draft eligible, not every single one, but a majority of the draft eligible players that have made announcements for Oregon are all going back to school. Mateo Ugiungole, the defensive end who was a round 2 pick, Amari Washington, defensive tackle, who was going to be a top 15 pick, probably hit a first round grade for me. Defensive tackle Bear Alexander was a day 2 pick. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's a bunch of guys who were definitely had draftable, outlooks, day 2, early day 3, that are going back. I think they have a bad taste in their mouth, and they're putting the band back together for one more run at the Natty.
And again, you look at this Indiana team, and again, this isn't the perfect example, but they're kind of like that LSU team. Now, again, that LSU team with Burrow is one of the best teams we've ever seen assembled. I'm not saying Indiana's that, but this is one of those teams you see every once in a while than in college football is just railroading people and just running over people. Like they're just a common. And I feel like more in the Oregon looks at it as like, look, we just ran to a buzzsaw this year. But next year, we feel like we can not only compete with everyone in the country, but we can win. And look, and I understand where a lot of Jet fans are upset with the NIL right now. But in a other way to look at this is in the long term, this might be a better thing for the game long term, because instead of having these quarterbacks that play maybe 1 or 2 years of college ball, they play 3 or 4 full seasons. They get all these extra reps in college. They get to play in these big stages in high pressure situations. So by the time they come out, they have more experience. They're more polished prospects instead of guys who, like you look at Ty Simpson, if he comes out, like, again, I think he did declare, but again, only has 1 year tape. There's a lot of rawness to his game. Where you look at Moore, it's a deeper class next year, but he'll be a more polished and ready professional when he does decide to come to the National Football League.
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done is, and I'm not, Bill Parcells has been out of the league for a long time, but there were certain little.
But they still talk to Aaron Glenn at least once a week.
Yeah, he still talks to Aaron Glenn. Yeah, I think Bill Parcells, gets a call from Aaron Glenn while he's having his oatmeal, nice warm oatmeal on the couch. I don't know how much conversation there really is there with Bill, but I digress. You look at all the quarterbacks taken in the first round, that have less than 20 starts. And over the past 30 years, only one of them, Kyler Murray, has gotten a second contract from the same team.
And they're looking to get rid of him this offseason.
And they're looking to get rid of him this offseason. But you're talking about the names like Sanchez, Darnold. What? Oh my God! Why can't I think of who's the backup there in Buffalo? He was
Trubisky.
Trubisky. The list goes on and on. Obviously, it's not very good. Anthony Richardson. The quarterback who unfortunately passed away, who was drafted, Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. Daniel Jones. I don't know if Daniel Jones got a second contract. I don't know if he had under 20 starts. So it doesn't look good. Dante Moore's best decision for Dante Moore is to probably go back and get more get more season in. He's very good.
Yeah.
Don't let recency bias and one bad game or 2 games against really good defenses in the playoffs and in the prime, in prime time, get under anyone's skin. He's a very talented quarterback. As a Jets fan, it hurts to pass on or not get the opportunity to draft some of that talent. Mm-hmm. The reality is that I have a feeling that the Jets wouldn't have given him the necessary time to sit and mature and learn and really develop. I think they would have forced him in, because he's the number 2 overall pick. And being the number 2 overall pick, you're now going to be, you're that takes you out of the 2027 draft class for quarterbacks. All in. You're not using number 2 pick and then using a first rounder or multiple first rounders to go get a quarterback next year. No. So I think the more likely aspect, especially if he goes back to school, is that you're going to see them, bringing competition, from the veteran route, whether it's free agency or trade. I happen to like the idea of trading for a Tanner McKee, who's the backup in Philly. I know a lot of people were really, really going gaga for Malik Willis. I think twofold. There's probably a twofold reason that he won't come here. Mm-hmm. One is his quarterback coach in Tennessee, when he wasn't developed, when he was rushed into the starting role and really kind of fell flat on the
Jets' current quarterback coach.
It's Charles London, the Jets,
who's a running back, which makes all the sense in the world.
The Jets' current quarterback coach, Charles London. So I don't think that's going to be a marriage that's gonna go and kind of rehash itself. And secondly, I think he's gonna have options. And the Jets aren't going to be first on many teams, list of priorities.
Right.
So I think that I think you go get a Tyler, you go get a Tanner McKee, which you'll have to trade for. Not high capital, but you're probably talking a day 3 pick, or you go get a Tyson Bagent from Chicago, the Chicago backup. I think he's good enough to be a low level starter, and you have them compete with a quarterback that you take outside of number 2. And probably outside of round 1, because I don't think, unless you want to do like a Jackson Dart and trade back up, into the end of first round, that's fine. But I don't think the Jets will use pick 2 or 16 on a quarterback.
And I agree. And we'll do like a basic summary here, because I think Tank for TY brings up a good point. So the chat's brought up Chambliss. They've brought up Ty Simpson. They've brought up Drew Aller. So we'll talk a little bit about later day picks. But to me, Ty Simpson, how I would navigate this is like you just mentioned, Jackson Dart. If Ty Simpson's sitting there in the 20s and you like the kid, I'd trade up from 33. And the reason I would trade back into round 1 is and again, maybe tell me if you think I'm wrong with this analysis, is it's worth it to me to give up a little extra draft capital to get the 5th-year option on a quarterback contract, so you have another year of financial control. Do you really think that makes a big difference? Is worth giving up that extra pick? And what are your thoughts on Simpson later in the first round?
So here's the thing. The 5th round option is nice. All right.
Yeah.
The 5th round option makes sense, but I don't know if it's the be all end all. I think the reason the Jets would trade up to go get a quarterback at the end of round 1 is to kind of beat some people that might be, sitting there looming at the end of round 1 that they want to get ahead of. I don't know if it's necessarily for the extra year of control or the possibility of year control. I think Ty Simpson would be next on my list if Dante Moore didn't go out. I mean, it would be Ty Simpson, and then for me, it would be a guy like Nussmeier, and then it would be a guy like Chambliss, and all of them have their strengths, and all of them have their clearly perceived weaknesses. I don't think either of them, any of the 3 that I just mentioned, would be guys that I would want to see the field in year 1. And again, that's why you come out and you go get a veteran. It doesn't have to be like an old guy. It doesn't have to be an old head. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to bring in like another Tyrod Taylor in here. It can be a younger guy.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. Or maybe Kirk Cousins is the answer. Who knows? I have no idea. I think you can bring in like an up and coming guy and just let them compete for the job.
Yeah.
Let them compete for the job. But man, it's gonna be a rough go, man. It's gonna be a rough go in 2026 if you don't get this position right, because the offensive coordinator, is his status, is he good? Can he hang? I don't know. That's still to be determined, because we saw nothing out of Justin Fields. This offensive team could not develop Justin Fields. As a matter of fact, I think he regressed.
Oh, yeah. And you brought up Malik Willis earlier. Like, if you're a guy like Malik Willis who's looking to get a second life in this league, you look at Justin Fields, who went from a guy who the Pittsburgh Steelers were thinking about bringing back as their starter, and someone we kind of were like, you know what, maybe he could be the next kind of Baker Mayfield, to being a guy where, is he on an NFL roster next season? Like, he might go start next season not on an NFL roster, which, again, but that's just how bad it went with the Jets. So you brought up Nussmeier and you brought up Trinidad. Do you think they are worth, like, hypothetically, the 33 to 44 pick range? Or would you be, again, the Jets don't have a 3rd round pick. They can obviously come back from 44, get some more picks. But do you feel like that's a little too early in the process and they're more of later, maybe early day 3, late day 2 dart throws? Or do you think they might be worth it at 33 or 44?
So I have 3rd round grades on both of them.
Okay.
I have a 2nd round grade in Simpson. I have 3rd round grades on both of them. However, if you want one of them, probably Chambliss for sure. If you want one, I mean, quarterbacks just always get overdrafted, right?
Oh yeah,
They always get overdrafted. So,
but it's like you said, their third round pick grades right now. But after the process, people are gonna hype them up to like, oh, could be first round picks when
correct.
That just always happens.
Correct. You're absolutely right about that. And listen, somebody's gonna, Trinidad is a weird situation. Actually, so is Garrett, because they're both 24 years old. Garrett Nussmeier coming into the season was like kind of an anomaly. Like, he's got wonderful arm talent. He's a little bit small. I mean, actually, they both are. Both him and Trinidad are a little bit small. They're both barely pushing 6 feet tall. Garrett Nussmeier's got a little bit more meat on his bones, and Nussmeier is the son of an offense coordinator. His dad or quarterbacks coach. I think his dad's quarterbacks coach in Philly, if I'm not mistaken, or New Orleans, one of the two.
Right. I think it is New Orleans. I think you were right with that one.
Yeah, he was with Philly, went to New Orleans, vice versa, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's got it. So he's got that pedigree, kind of that lineage that to bounce off of, and I think he makes a lot of real good throws. So I don't question the arm talent. I question a lot of decision making. I question a lot of the stuff, like, when the play breaks down, like, he just does not, like, I question the composure. So that doesn't bode well for undersized guys who aren't really, really dual threat, with their kind of their legs and trust their trust their arms to do the majority of the work. He played hurt. He got hurt this year, Garrett Nussmeier, and was ultimately benched. After throwing for less than 2,000 yards, 12 TDs, and 5 touchdowns, as opposed to last year, where he threw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns with 12 interceptions.
Yeah, it feels like if you're a team, you're trying to draft him, and this process is he closer to this year where he got nicked up and was making the bad decisions, or is this just a bad season where you had the coach eventually get fired and basically 2024 is the right tape? And look, there's going to be a lot of interesting. I think this quarterback class is fascinating because there's a lot of interesting prospects. They just happen to be day 2 and day 3. And one guy that keeps being brought up, and again, thank you, Mr. Vaughn, hit the like and subscribe. And again, make sure to follow Dom C. Does a great job, does great top 30 visit tracks throughout the whole offseason. So if you're a Jets fan, you got to be locked in on his stuff. But one thing I keep seeing being brought up in the chat is Drew Aller. Now, again, we know what happened last year. If he comes out last year, maybe even as a first-round pick, you look at what happened with him, and again, the injury will be a major thing to discuss this offseason. Is he the type of guy, like if he's sitting there early round 3 or early day 3, do you take the flyer on him? Do you think he's one of those guys he's worth taking a flyer on, or do you think there's just the inaccuracies, the inability to, really deliver the ball at some points is going to come back and bite him in this draft process?
I absolutely would take a flyer on a guy like him. For nothing more, that he's from the Northeast. Well, I think he's from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. So Ohio or Pennsylvania, kind of grew up in this area. He's built, he's got the body. He traits wise, he checks off all the boxes. Arm strength wise, he checks off all the boxes. Arm strength wise, he checks off all the boxes. That he's going to be able to deal with the Northeast weather. And that he can really sling it. So if there's nothing more, that alone is worth a shot, with me, at least. If I'm, if I'm the shot caller, there's a lot that still has to be developed in his game. I think that, he's got to trust. He doesn't trust his eyes yet. That's what it comes down to. A lot of check downs. Once he starts getting a little inaccurate, it kind of snowballs. So I think there's that to be said, that he needs a lot of work. I don't know if this is the team that can develop him, but
and that's the thing I always have with this staff. And It goes back to the Bronco game for me. Like, I look at this like, can you give me traits of how you're going to develop a young quarterback? And I saw Justin Fields in that Bronco game as lost as any quarterback I've ever seen. And instead of just getting him out of the game and just explaining, look, we put Tyrod in, he thought he gave us the best chance to win. Justin's still our quarterback. There's just some things we need to work on. But instead, the Jets didn't only not throw him a life ring, they stomped on his head while he was drowning and basically gave him one of the most embarrassing performances in a quarterback history. And that to me was alarming where, like, let's say they draft like a Drew Aller or someone and it's week 8 or 9 and the Jets have him out there and it's like he's going against a great defense and you can just tell the kid doesn't have it that day.
Yep.
Are the Jets going to keep him out there and have him maybe be a viral meme with seeing ghosts or, making a horrendous decision or getting hurt? Like, I just don't trust the staff. And I think that was one of the turning points for me was just how they handled Justin Fields. And I understand Fields is a veteran quarterback, but he's still 25 years old. He's still a kid. Like, that to me was very alarming. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think that there was one positive thing I can take from this coaching staff, outside of the special teams.
Yeah.
This year, I think we talked about it. I think everyone, regressed, and it's a shame because we were sold the bill of goods that they were going to be coached up and this and that. People talk about the offensive line that they worked and they were coached up. I don't know how well they were coached up. I just think anything other than Keith Carter was going to be an improvement, and you were going to see market improvements across the line, and they also a huge anomaly of staying healthy for the most part. The same 5 guys that started week 1 started all 17 weeks.
And plus, 2 of the guys were veteran players who've been in this league for years with Myers and Simpson. And 3 of them, let's also keep in mind, are top 40 picks, including 2 that are top 12 NFL draft picks. So if they weren't playing well, that'd be even more concerning.
Yep.
So, but final thoughts here, I guess, as we enter this draft process, because it's going to be a long, we're going to talk ad nauseum about the quarterbacks. We're going to talk ad nauseum about all the different players. But what are some key areas and the key positions in this draft that you think lend themselves to Jets? I know pass rusher is very good, lots of great receivers, but day 3 especially, like, what should be the position group that you think the Jets should really take advantage of day 3 in this upcoming draft class?
Ooh, good question. I think that the interior defensive line is pretty deep. I think you're going to find a lot of good. We just lost one, and Amari Washington is going back to Oregon.
Yeah.
He was a first-round pick for me this year. That's a damn shame, but I think that there's a lot of depth. I think there's a lot of different types of interior defensive linemen. You got some big, run stuffing 2-gapper types, and you got some smaller, more penetrating pass rush types. And they're all up and down the board. So I think the interior of the defensive line, I think you'll be able to get some depth there. I think you'll see some wide receiver depth. I think, it may be not so much on day 3, but I think that there's a big, there's a top 3 pretty much. And then I think from 4 till probably like 15, which will go, straight through from the end of round 1, straight through round 3. I think you're going to get really good value with those guys. And I think the deepest position of all the positions in this class, which is very good for us, is the linebacker crew. It's been a very, very poor linebacker class the past couple of years. That's not the case this year. You can make an argument that 3 to 4 off-ball linebackers are worthy of a first-round selection. All 4 of them will not go. But you could see all 4 of them easily off the board in the top 50, and maybe one of them will end up with the Jets, because I think that's a position that needs to be overhauled. But whether or not they spend early capital on it, you can also get late capital that's going to really step in and help an NFL team right from the get-go.
And Dom, we're definitely going to have you coming back on during this draft season. Again, he's going live in just a little bit, so check out his channel. The links are in the description below. There is one player I cannot wait for you to dissect, and it's a quarterback. I can't wait for you to give me your diagnosis of Joe Fagnano from
Yeah.
UConn. So I'm just waiting for Mighty Joe Young, like that one. So again, I know I'm a bit
Listen,
of a
he
homer,
is.
but
Yeah, listen. I'll tell you this. A little kind of preview. Skylar Bell is in my top 10 overall wide receivers in this class. I think that kid can play. I don't know if Fagnano's going to make the NFL, if I'm being honest, and I think you understand that too. 25, 26 years old, he's going to be, the UDFA
Tyler Shuck made it work, so you never know.
Yeah. But there's going to be some guys on UConn that definitely are going to hear their name called in April. And I'm head over heels in love with Skylar Bell.
He is such a crisp runner too. Just watching him was and he plays above his size. Like there were plays he would go up and get the football, and you look at his size on the depth chart, you're like, wait a minute, he's not 6'3", 6'4", and he's making that play. So again, I
think he's second in the nation or third in the nation in yards per route run.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a big factor, key analytic for like determining, opportunity for big plays.
Yeah, I think he's top 3 in yards, catches, and touchdowns too in Division I. And again, I understand it's UConn. I understand it gets the independents, but you can also tell when someone really stands out on film, and every time you watch UConn, that he just jumped out.
Yeah,
which was,
low drop rate. He's going to be a slot guy only, so that's fine. That's not every NFL team's cup of tea anymore. They want a lot of those guys that can move all over and play multiple. But man, whoever gets Skylar Bell is going to get a player. I'll tell you that much. If you guys liked Kyle Williams last year, I think you're going to love Skylar Bell this year.
And on that note, we will have lots more great Jets content. So hit the like, subscribe button so you don't miss us throughout this great offseason, because it's going to be a wild one. And will the Jets improve their process? Time will tell. Again, he's the great Dom C. Check him out on Jets X Factor. His links, and he's actually going live in a couple minutes. So if you're still up, check him out. But until next time, I'm your host, Nolan Rich, and this has been Rich Sports Talk. We will see you guys next time.